They didn't just cross a line. They erased it. I came home from a week on the Gulf Coast, sunburned, sandy, still thinking about shrimp tacos and ocean air, and the first thing I noticed wasn't the house, wasn't the trees, wasn't even my dog barking inside. It was the space. Too much space. I could see straight through my backyard and into my neighbor's patio like someone had ripped a curtain off a stage. My fence was gone. Not damaged. Not leaning. Gone. Now, to understand why that hit me the way it did, you have to understand what that fence meant. I lived just outside a small town in western North Carolina, the kind of place where folks wave from their trucks and mind their business at the same time. 10 years ago, I bought 3 wooded acres at the edge of a gravel road. Nothing fancy, just quiet. I'd spent most of my 30s in Charlotte working construction management, long hours, traffic, noise, and I promised myself when I turned 40 I'd get somewhere with trees and air I didn't have to share. In 2016, after 2 solid years of saving, I built that fence myself. 6 feet high, pressure-treated pine, set in concrete footings every 8 feet. It ran the entire perimeter of my property, just under 200 linear feet along the north boundary where my land met the neighboring lot. I dug every post hole by hand with a rented auger that tried to break my wrist more than once. My buddy Caleb came over on weekends to help me set the panels, and we drank cheap beer sitting on overturned buckets when we were done. That fence marked more than a boundary line. It was my line. It kept my lab, Daisy, from wandering. It kept deer from trampling my garden. It gave me the privacy I moved out there for. When I closed that gate at night, I felt like the world stayed outside. For years, nobody had an issue with it. The house next door sat empty for a while. Then an older couple lived there quietly until they downsized. We'd wave, sometimes talk about weather. No drama. Then the Carters moved in. Ethan and Marla Carter. Mid-40s, sharp clothes, big SUV with Illinois plates the first week. Ethan introduced himself the day the moving truck arrived. Firm handshake, polished smile, the kind of guy who scans your property while he's talking like he's already calculating something. He told me he worked in corporate strategy for a tech firm in Chicago and was now remote, said they wanted a slower pace for their kids, 2 boys about 10 and 12. Marla talked about community and how excited she was to open things up. I didn't think much of that phrase at the time. About a month after they moved in, I found Ethan standing at our shared boundary, fingers hooked over the top rail of my fence, staring at it like it offended him. He shook his head slowly when he saw me walk up with Daisy on a leash. "You ever think about taking this down?" he asked, casual as you please. "Taking what down?" I said, though I knew. "This wall. I don't know, it's kind of divisive, don't you think? We're neighbors. We could open up the yards, create one big shared space. The boys would love it." I remember scratching Daisy behind the ears, buying myself a second. "I built that fence," I said. "It's on my property line. I like my privacy." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Property lines are just lines on paper, man. We're in this together now. Not that together," I said, and I laughed a little so it wouldn't sound harsh. "Fence stays." He held my gaze a beat too long, then nodded like he'd filed something away. After that, things got subtle. Their boys started kicking soccer balls that bounced against my fence, over and over, like a test. Marla mentioned at the mailbox how closed off the neighborhood felt. Ethan had a contractor over one Saturday measuring things near the boundary, and when I asked what was up, he said, "Just exploring options." I should have paid more attention. The week I left for vacation, Ethan saw me loading the truck. "Heading out?" he asked. "Just for a few days," I said. "Beach break." He smiled again. "Enjoy the openness." I thought it was just one of his weird comments. 7 days later, I turned onto my gravel driveway at dusk, tired but relaxed, Daisy panting in the back seat. As the headlights swept across the yard, I noticed the sightline first. I could see straight through to their patio lights glowing warm against their house. I stopped the truck halfway up the drive. The fence along the north boundary was gone. Every panel, every crossbeam. All that remained were jagged posts sticking up from cracked concrete footings, some tilted, some splintered. The boards were piled haphazardly on my side like debris after a storm. And in the exact stretch where my fence used to stand, there was a volleyball net set up. Their boys were laughing, diving into what used to be my enclosed yard. I got out of the truck slowly, like if I moved too fast it might become real. Daisy started barking, confused by the openness. Ethan stood on his back patio, tongs in one hand, flipping burgers like it was the 4th of July. I walked straight across the exposed dirt line that used to be a boundary. "What happened to my fence?" I asked. He turned, saw my face, and didn't even flinch. "Oh hey, welcome back," he said. "We took it down. It was an eyesore." "An eyesore? That fence is on my property," I said, my voice low enough that it surprised even me. He shrugged. "Our landscape architect said the flow between the properties would be so much better without a barrier. The boys need room to run. It's healthier." "You demolished my fence," I said. "We removed it," he corrected, like it was semantics. "Most of it's already at the dump. Disposal wasn't cheap either. $1,200. If you want to split that, we can settle up on Venmo." I just stared at him. There's a moment when anger goes so deep it feels cold instead of hot, like your body decides rage is too messy and opts for ice. "I told you the fence stays," I said. He waved the tongs dismissively. "You'll adjust. Once you get used to the openness, you'll thank us." Us. I looked at the broken concrete at my feet, the splintered wood, my dog pacing behind me in a yard that was no longer contained. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about kids needing space. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control, about someone deciding they knew better what my property should look like. I walked back to my house without another word, took out my phone, and started photographing everything. Every broken post, every pile of boards, the volleyball net planted right over my line. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a friend from high school who'd become a real estate attorney. Her name was Laura Bennett. And when she saw the photos the next morning, she didn't laugh, didn't hesitate. Her jaw tightened. "They did what?" she said. I told her everything. She went quiet for a second, then said, "Okay, we're not just rebuilding a fence." Laura didn't raise her voice, didn't rant, didn't call them idiots the way Caleb did when I told him over the phone that night. She just leaned back in her office chair, folded her hands, and looked at the photos again like a surgeon studying an X-ray. "This is textbook trespass and destruction of property," she said. "They crossed onto your land and removed a structure that was legally installed. That's not a misunderstanding. That's deliberate." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until she said it. Up until then, there was this tiny voice in my head asking if maybe I'd overreacted, if maybe this was just some suburban culture clash, city folks thinking differently. But the more I replayed Ethan's grin, the Venmo comment, the word adjust, the more that doubt burned off. "What are my options?" I asked. "We start simple," she said. "Demand letter. Immediate restoration to original condition. Their expense. If they ignore it, we escalate." I nodded. "Do it." She drafted the letter that afternoon. It was firm, precise, no theatrics. It cited county property records, included a copy of my original survey from when I bought the land, referenced local building codes that allowed 6-foot privacy fencing on residential property. She sent it certified mail and emailed a copy to Ethan. 2 days later, I got my first real look at who I was dealing with. Instead of responding himself, Ethan had a law firm in downtown Chicago reply on his behalf. Heavy letterhead. 3 attorneys CC'd. The tone was polished and condescending all at once. They claimed the fence had been structurally unsound and poorly maintained. They suggested it posed a potential hazard. They framed the removal as a good faith effort to improve shared property aesthetics. Shared property. They offered to split the cost of installing a decorative 3-foot hedge along what they described as the approximate boundary line. 3 feet. Replacing 6 feet of solid wood privacy with knee-high bushes. When Laura read the letter aloud in her office, she paused halfway through and just blinked at me. "They're trying to reframe the narrative," she said. "If this becomes a dispute about taste or landscaping preference, they think they win. We don't let it become that." I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about whether someone with more money and louder lawyers could just decide your boundary didn't matter. Laura filed for an emergency injunction with the county court. She attached the photos, the survey, copies of my original permit, and the letter from their firm. Within a week, we had a hearing date. Word travels fast in a small town. By the time the court date rolled around, half the folks on our road knew something was up. Caleb showed up just to sit in the back row. Mrs. Delaney from down the road squeezed my arm and said, "Don't let them bully you." The Carters walked in like they were attending a board meeting. Ethan in a tailored suit, Marla carrying a leather portfolio. They didn't look at me. The judge, a silver-haired man named Judge Whitaker, had a reputation for not suffering fools. He flipped through the photos slowly, adjusted his glasses, and then looked over the bench at Ethan. "You removed a fence that was not on your property?" he asked. Ethan stood. "Your Honor, the structure was deteriorating and creating an unwelcoming barrier between two families. We believe." The judge held up a hand. "Was it on your property?" Ethan hesitated half a second too long. "Technically, it appears the boundary may." "Was it on your property?" The judge repeated. "No, Your Honor." The courtroom went quiet. Judge Whitaker looked down at the survey, then back at Ethan. "You do not get to redefine property lines because you dislike them. The plaintiff's fence was lawful and established. You will restore the fence to its original specifications within 14 days at your expense." He tapped the papers once. "Failure to comply will result in further penalties." That was it. No long speech. No drama. Just clear. Outside the courtroom, Ethan finally looked at me. "This is ridiculous," he said under his breath. "You're escalating something that didn't have to be adversarial." "You tore down my fence," I said. "That was the escalation." He shook his head like I was the unreasonable one. "For 14 days, nothing happened. No construction. No contractors. The volleyball net stayed up. Their boys kept playing in what used to be my enclosed yard. Ethan even had a small fire pit delivered and set up near the old boundary, as if daring me to react." On day 13, Laura called him directly. "Tomorrow is your deadline," she said, speakerphone on so I could hear. "When does reconstruction begin?" Ethan's voice was smooth. "We're evaluating our options." "You have one option," she said. "Rebuild the fence. We're considering appealing." "You can consider it from behind a restored fence," she replied, and hung up. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the distant hum of crickets, and, every so often, laughter drifting across the open space that shouldn't have been open. There's a particular kind of anger that isn't explosive. It's patient. It waits. It sharpens. At 5:30 on day 15, my phone buzzed. It was Laura. "They didn't file an appeal," she said. "And they didn't rebuild. We move forward." "Forward how?" I asked. "You want your original fence back?" she said carefully. "Or do you want to make sure this never happens again?" That question sat between us for a moment. I thought about the splintered posts, the Venmo comment, the word adjust. I thought about coming home and seeing my boundary erased like it was optional. "I want something stronger," I said. Laura exhaled slowly, almost amused. "I thought you might." We'd already consulted a surveyor to remark the exact property line with fresh stakes and flags. I met him out there the afternoon before. He walked the line with a GPS unit, checking coordinates against county records. "You were right," he said, hammering a bright orange stake into the soil. "Your fence sat fully on your land. They had no claim." Good. I'd also called a local fencing company I trusted, the same crew that had supplied my original panels years ago. When I told the owner, Miguel, what happened, he just whistled low. "They tore it out," he said, without asking. "Every inch," I said. He shook his head. "You want wood again?" I looked at the open stretch of dirt, at the Carter boys riding bikes across what used to be my yard. "No," I said. "I want steel." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "How high?" I thought about the 6 feet that had once felt solid. 8, I said. He grinned slowly. "That'll make a statement." We planned it quietly. Steel posts set in deep concrete footings. Solid steel panels with zero visibility. No gaps. No decorative lattice. Clean, industrial, final. At dawn on day 15, 2 pickup trucks rolled up my driveway followed by a concrete mixer. The rumble of engines cut through the morning stillness. Daisy barked from the porch as 6 workers unloaded tools. Miguel handed me a hard hat like we were breaking ground on a skyscraper. Across the open line, the Carter's back door slid open. Marla stepped out first, coffee mug in hand, confusion on her face. Ethan followed, still in gym shorts, eyes narrowing as he took in the trucks, the survey stakes, the steel panels stacked neatly in the bed of a truck. "What's this?" he called across the yard. I walked to the flag boundary line and planted my boots just inside my property. "You had 14 days, I said. He looked at the steel panels, then back at me. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious," I said. Miguel fired up the auger. The first hole went down exactly on the survey mark. The auger bit into the dirt with a low mechanical growl, kicking up red clay and damp soil that smelled like rain even though the sky was clear, And I remember thinking how different that sound felt compared to the silence of coming home to nothing but broken posts. This time it wasn't erasure. It was construction. Deliberate. Precise. Ethan stepped closer to the line, barefoot now, arms crossed tight over his chest. "You're overreacting," he said. "This is hostile." Miguel didn't look up. He just kept guiding the auger straight down into the earth like he'd done 1,000 times before. I looked at Ethan and, honestly, I didn't feel rage anymore. I felt clarity. "You tore down my fence," I said evenly. "This is compliance." Concrete started pouring into the first hole, thick and gray, settling around the base of an 8-foot steel post. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, measuring twice, leveling each post with a laser line, locking everything in place before moving to the next. Marla walked out farther into their yard, mug forgotten on the patio table. "You're building a prison wall," she said. "What are the neighbors going to think?" I almost laughed at that. "The neighbors saw what you did," I said. "They've already thought about it." And that was true. Mrs. Delaney stood at the edge of her driveway pretending to check her mailbox. Caleb leaned against his truck parked a little too casually near the road. People notice when someone crosses a line that clearly. By mid-morning, the steel posts were standing in a straight, unbroken row along the freshly surveyed boundary, taller than the original fence by a full 2 feet. When the crew began sliding the solid steel panels into place, the openness that had felt like a wound started closing. Each panel locked into the next with a clean metallic click. No gaps, no slats, just a continuous surface that caught the light and gave nothing back. Ethan's voice sharpened. "This is going to tank our property value," he said. "You can't just throw up an industrial barrier like this." "I can't," I said. "It's on my property." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "We were trying to improve things. Make it communal. You're making it adversarial." That word again, as if I'd started something. I walked closer to the line, stopping a foot short of the new posts. "You decided my privacy was optional," I said. "You decided my boundary was negotiable. You didn't ask. You acted." He opened his mouth, then closed it. By early afternoon, the last panel slid into place. 8 feet of steel and concrete stretching the full length of our shared boundary. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't charming. It was unmistakable. Miguel wiped his hands on a rag and nodded at me. "Solid," he said. "They're not moving this without a demolition permit." I stood back and looked at it. The fence cast a long shadow across my yard, cool and steady. Daisy ran along the inside edge, sniffing the base, then trotted back toward the house like nothing had ever been wrong. For the first time since coming back from vacation, I felt that familiar sense of enclosure, of being home. Ethan stood on his side, staring up at the steel. "This isn't over," he said quietly. I believed him. 2 weeks later, I was served with papers. He was suing me for $75,000, claiming the new fence was excessive and had significantly reduced the aesthetic appeal and market value of his property. His complaint described it as a hostile structure erected with retaliatory intent. Retaliatory intent. Laura didn't even blink when she read it. "He's trying to flip the narrative again," she said. "Make you look unreasonable." "Am I?" I asked her genuinely. She leaned back in her chair. "Did you build it on your property?" "Yes." "Did you violate any height restrictions?" "No. County allows up to 8 feet in rural residential." "Did he comply with the court order?" "No." She raised an eyebrow. "Then no. You're not unreasonable. You're thorough." The second hearing felt different from the first. There was more tension in the room, more people watching. Word had spread beyond our little road. Ethan's attorney this time was local, probably realizing a Chicago firm didn't carry much weight in a county courtroom. He argued that while I had the right to rebuild, the scale and material choice constituted a form of harassment, that it created a visually oppressive environment. Judge Whitaker listened, hands folded. When it was Laura's turn, she didn't grandstand. She simply laid out the timeline. The original lawful fence. The unauthorized demolition. The ignored court deadline. The rebuild executed entirely within code. She paused at the end. "Your Honor," she said, "my client did not seek conflict. He sought restoration. If the defendants find the result unpleasant, that is a consequence of their own choices." The judge turned to Ethan. "Did you remove the original fence without permission?" he asked again, like we were back at the beginning. Ethan shifted in his seat. "Yes, but—" "And did you fail to comply with this court's order to rebuild it?" Silence. Then, yes. Judge Whitaker nodded once. You do not get to damage someone's property, ignore a direct order, and then complain about the manner in which they secure their own land. Case dismissed. He looked down at the paperwork. Defendant is responsible for plaintiff's construction costs and legal fees. The gavel came down softly, but it might as well have been thunder. Outside the courthouse, Ethan didn't approach me this time. He walked straight to his car, jaw tight, Marlo a step behind him. I stood on the steps for a moment, letting the air hit my face. Laura bumped my shoulder lightly. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I think so. Because the truth is, winning didn't feel triumphant. It felt steady, like balance restored. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of iced tea and watched the sun dip behind the tree line. The steel fence glowed orange for a minute, then faded into silhouette. On the other side, I could hear faint movement, muted now, contained. Daisy lay at my feet, completely unconcerned with property law or ego or aesthetic philosophy. I thought about how easily this could have gone differently. If I'd shrugged it off. If I'd agreed to the hedge. If I'd let someone redefine my space to avoid tension. There's this pressure sometimes, especially in tight communities, to keep the peace at any cost. To not make waves. To compromise even when compromise means shrinking yourself. But here's what I learned. Boundaries aren't aggressive. They're clarifying. Ethan wanted openness, but what he really wanted was control. He saw my fence as a statement about him, when it was never about him at all. It was about me choosing how I live on my land. The steel wall still stands today. 8 feet of concrete and resolve. We don't talk. We don't wave. It's quiet. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled that first conversation differently. If there was a version of events where we ended up sharing beers instead of court dates. Maybe. Or maybe some people only understand lines when they run into them. So I'm curious what you think. Was I justified in going bigger and stronger, or did I cross into pettiness? At what point does defending your space become retaliation? And if someone tears down your boundary once, do you rebuild it the same way, or do you make sure they never mistake it again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thought your property was negotiable, share this story. Sometimes the line you draw isn't just about land. Sometimes it's about respect.